Before 1948, many American Jews saw themselves as simply Americans who followed Judaism. But after Israel was founded, everything shifted. Then, in 1967, one event completely transformed how American Jews viewed their identity, politics, and faith. Some called it a miracle. Others saw it as a turning point that divided communities. What really happened? And why does it still affect American Jews today? Stay with me as we uncover the hidden history that reshaped an entire people. Imagine a time before Israel existed. A time when American Jews lived in a world where their identity was shaped not by a distant homeland, but by the streets of New York, the farmlands of the Midwest, and the bustling markets of Los Angeles. They were teachers, doctors, factory workers, and business owners, deeply woven into the American fabric. For many, Judaism was more than just a religion. It was a culture, a history, a way of life. But it was also something deeply personal, something carried in the heart rather than worn on the sleeve. There was no single way to be Jewish in America. Some were devout, attending synagogue every week. Others were secular, embracing Jewish traditions only on holidays. And then there were those who saw their Jewishness not in religious terms, but in shared values, education, community, resilience. Yet, despite their differences, one thing united them all. America was home. The early 20th century was a time of opportunity, but also of struggle. Waves of Jewish immigrants had arrived from Europe, escaping persecution and seeking a better life. In crowded tenement buildings of New York's Lower East Side, families lived side by side, speaking Yiddish in their homes while learning English in the streets. They worked long hours in garment factories, saving every penny to send their children to school, hoping the next generation would live the American dream. And many did. By the 1920s and 30s, Jewish families had started to rise in society. They attended Ivy League schools, opened successful businesses, and even entered politics. They fought in World War I and later World War II, proving their loyalty to the only country they called home. Yet, for all their success, there was always a quiet, unspoken tension, a feeling of being different. Synagogues were sometimes vandalized. Elite universities had quotas limiting Jewish students. Country clubs and certain neighborhoods subtly and sometimes openly refused Jewish members. This was the paradox of Jewish life in America. Accepted, yet not fully embraced. Integrated, yet always somewhat apart. For thousands of years, Jewish identity had been tied to an ancient longing, the dream of returning to Zion. But by the early 20th century, for most American Jews, that dream had become more of a legend than a reality. Few had ever set foot in Palestine. Fewer still imagined it as a future home. Instead, their focus was on building a life in America. Judaism, for many, was no longer about a nation or a land. It was about ethics, culture, and history. It was about making the world a better place, fighting for civil rights, and standing against injustice. Some American Jews were drawn to socialism, believing in a universal struggle for equality. Others thrived in capitalism, seeing America as a land where hard work and ambition could lead to success. But what united them all was the belief that Judaism was something that could exist anywhere, without borders, without a physical homeland. When the Zionist movement gained momentum in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many American Jews watched from a distance. Some were inspired, donating small amounts to support Jewish settlers in Palestine. Others dismissed it entirely. To them, Zionism felt like an old-world idea, one that had little relevance in modern America. Some Jewish leaders even feared that supporting Zionism would create suspicion, that it would reinforce the dangerous stereotype that Jews were loyal to another land. They wanted to prove that they were 100% American, and any talk of a Jewish state in the Middle East seemed unnecessary, even risky. And so, for decades, Zionism remained a fringe movement among American Jews. It was something that existed in the background, a distant idea rather than a central part of their identity. But history has a way of forcing people to confront what they thought they had settled. As the world moved toward war in the 1930s, American Jews watched in horror as anti-Semitism spread across Europe. Hitler's rise to power, the violence against Jewish communities, the growing refugee crisis. Suddenly, being Jewish wasn't just about culture or tradition. It was about survival. Yet, even as these horrors unfolded, many American Jews still clung to the belief that America was different. That here, they were safe. That here, they had a future. What they didn't know was that everything was about to change. Because in just a few years, an event would take place that would shake their identity to its core. An event that would force American Jews to look beyond their comfortable lives and face a question they had long ignored. And the answer would come not from America, but from a tiny strip of land thousands of miles away. The creation of Israel. The news broke like a thunderclap. May 14th, 1948. After centuries of exile, after the unimaginable horrors of the Holocaust, after decades of Zionist struggle, Israel was born. The Jewish state was no longer a dream whispered in prayers or a hope passed down through generations. It was real. It was tangible. It was a nation standing on the soil of its ancestors. In synagogues across America, people wept. Some cried out in joy, others in disbelief. Elderly Jews who had spent their entire lives believing they would never live to see a Jewish homeland kissed the ground and whispered, Shehecheyanu, the blessing for witnessing a historic moment. But not everyone knew how to feel. For some American Jews, the establishment of Israel was a miracle, a testament to Jewish survival, a beacon of hope rising from the ashes of the Holocaust. They saw Israel as a home for the homeless, a shield for the vulnerable, a place where Jews would never again be at the mercy of others. But for others, there was hesitation. For decades, American Jews had carefully balanced their dual identity, deeply Jewish, but also fully American. They had fought to prove their loyalty to the United States, to show that they belonged. And now, with the sudden birth of a Jewish state, a quiet fear settled in. Would their patriotism be questioned? Would they now be seen as outsiders, as people whose true allegiance lay not with America, but with Israel? Even among Jewish leaders, there were debates. Some rabbis urged celebration, calling Israel the fulfillment of ancient prophecy. Others remained cautious, worried that Zionism would divide the American Jewish community. And then there was another fear. What if Israel failed? Because even as American Jews celebrated in their synagogues and homes, halfway across the world, Israel was already at war. The ink on its Declaration of Independence was barely dry when 5 Arab nations attacked. The new state had almost no army, no proper weapons, no guarantees of survival. It was outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded by enemies who had sworn to destroy it. American Jews watched with bated breath. Would this dream collapse before it had even begun? Would history repeat itself, leaving Jews once again wandering without a home? And that was when something extraordinary happened. American Jews, whether they had supported Zionism or not, suddenly felt something stir inside them, a sense of urgency, of responsibility. Israel was not just another country. It was their country, their history, their people, their blood. Across the United States, an unprecedented movement began. Wealthy Jewish businessmen poured millions of dollars into Israeli banks, funding everything from weapons to food supplies. Poor Jewish families, who had little to spare, emptied their pockets to send whatever they could. Volunteers, doctors, engineers, former soldiers, boarded ships and planes to help Israel fight. Even Jewish gangsters, men who had once ruled the underworld, smuggled guns to arm the struggling new nation. It was the kind of unity that had never been seen before, and it changed everything. The war raged on for months, but against all odds, Israel survived. When the news came that Israel had not only defended itself but had won, there was an explosion of emotion across the Jewish world. In New York, in Chicago, in Miami, Jews flooded the streets, singing and dancing. People who had never cared for Zionism before were now proudly waving the blue and white flag. But more than just celebration, there was a shift, a transformation deep in the soul of American Jews. For the first time, Judaism was no longer just about faith, culture, or tradition. It was about a nation, a people with a land, with an army, with a future. Israel was no longer an abstract idea. It was real. And American Jews would never see themselves the same way again. But with this newfound pride came something else, a quiet divide. Not every American Jew felt the same way about Israel. Some worried that this growing attachment to a foreign nation could make them seem less American. Others, especially more secular Jews, questioned whether a Jewish state was truly necessary in a world where they had already found freedom. And then there were those who worried about something even deeper, the question of what it truly meant to be Jewish. Was Judaism about religion, or was it about nationalism? Could one be Jewish without being connected to Israel? These were questions that had no simple answers, and over time, these questions would grow. They would shape political debates, spark fierce arguments, and even create fractures within Jewish communities. But in 1948, all of that was still in the future. For now, American Jews stood at the edge of something new. Their world had changed forever. What came next would redefine everything they thought they knew. Because Israel's birth was only the beginning. The real transformation was still to come. 19 years had passed since Israel's birth. But for many American Jews, the connection to the Jewish state remained distant. They cheered when Israel was created. They sent donations. But for most, Israel was still over there. It was a place of history, a place of struggle, but not necessarily a part of their daily lives. That changed in June 1967. In just 6 days, everything shifted. As tensions rose in the Middle East, American Jews watched in horror. Egypt, Syria, and Jordan had surrounded Israel. The rhetoric from Arab leaders was chilling. They spoke of wiping Israel off the map. The world seemed to hold its breath. And then, something unexpected happened. Instead of being crushed, Israel fought back. And not just fought back, it won. Decisively. In 6 days, Israel changed history. The Israeli army, outnumbered and outgunned, launched a lightning-fast campaign. They destroyed Egypt's air force before it even got off the ground. They pushed back Jordanian forces and captured East Jerusalem. They stormed the Golan Heights and forced Syria into retreat. And then, something even more astonishing, they took back the Western Wall. For the first time in 2,000 years, Jews could freely pray at their holiest site. The image of Israeli soldiers, young men with dust-covered faces, standing before the Western Wall, eyes filled with tears, spread across the world. American Jews saw it, and something deep inside them awakened. This wasn't just another war. This wasn't just politics. This was biblical. This was prophecy. This was history repeating itself in their lifetime. Rabbis who had never spoken of Zionism suddenly gave sermons on Israel's miracle. Jews who had never felt a strong attachment to Israel suddenly felt a surge of pride. Even those who had always kept their Jewish identity private felt something shift. Before 1967, many American Jews saw Judaism as culture, as tradition, as faith, but not necessarily as nationalism. But now they had witnessed something that felt like destiny. Israel wasn't just a country anymore. It was strength. It was survival. It was proof that Jews were no longer victims. They were warriors. For American Jews, this war changed everything. Donations skyrocketed. Support for Israel became a central part of Jewish life. Young Jewish students who had once been disconnected started joining Jewish organizations, and more importantly, Israel became personal. Because now it wasn't just about Israel, it was about being Jewish. And for the first time, American Jews weren't just watching history. They felt like they were part of it. The Six-Day War of 1967 had changed everything. It was no longer just about Israel's survival. It was about Jewish strength, pride, and destiny. For the first time, American Jews didn't just feel like spectators. They felt like they were part of something bigger. But as the dust settled in Israel, something else was happening thousands of miles away in the United States. A shift that would reshape American politics, Jewish identity, and the very way the world saw Israel. Before 1967, American Jews had supported Israel with sympathy. They donated money, they prayed for its survival, and they saw it as a distant cousin, connected but separate. After 1967, that changed. Now, Israel was at the heart of American Jewish life. Young Jewish students who had never cared about Zionism were suddenly joining Jewish organizations. Families who had never discussed Israel at dinner now spoke about it with passion. And most importantly, American Jews realized they could do more than just support Israel. They could fight for it. It started with small groups, Jewish activists, scholars, and businessmen who saw that Israel's survival couldn't be left to chance. They believed that if Israel was to remain strong, it needed more than just prayers and donations. It needed American political backing. This was the beginning of AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and other powerful pro-Israel lobbying groups. These groups had one mission: to make sure the United States government stood with Israel, no matter what. They lobbied Congress, met with presidents, and ensured that American aid flowed into Israel. And they were shockingly successful. For many American Jews, Zionism became inseparable from their Jewish identity. Supporting Israel wasn't just about politics, it was about who they were. Synagogues proudly displayed Israeli flags. Jewish schools made learning about Israel a priority. Even in pop culture, being pro-Israel became a defining trait of American Jewish identity. For Jewish immigrants who had long struggled to find their place in America, Israel became a source of confidence. It was proof that Jews were no longer just victims of history. They were makers of history. And yet, beneath this powerful wave of Zionist pride, a quiet tension was beginning to grow. Not every American Jew felt the same way about Israel. Some worried that the growing political focus on Israel could harm Jewish life in America. Would Jews now be seen as more loyal to Israel than to the United States? Would this newfound Zionist activism put American Jews in danger of political backlash? Others questioned what it truly meant to be Jewish. For centuries, Judaism had been about faith, tradition, and community. But now, was Jewishness being redefined as nationalism? Could you be Jewish without supporting Israel? This question began to divide American Jews. Some embraced Zionism wholeheartedly, believing that supporting Israel was a duty, a sacred mission. Others felt alienated, uncertain, even uncomfortable with the way Israel was becoming central to American Jewish identity. And then there was an even deeper fear. What if Israel made decisions that American Jews couldn't support? As Israel grew stronger, its political choices became more controversial. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict intensified. The settlements expanded. The wars continued. For American Jews who had once seen Israel as a pure symbol of Jewish survival, things were getting complicated. Some doubled down, defending Israel no matter what. Others started questioning their unconditional support. This internal struggle between loyalty and doubt, between identity and politics, wasn't going away. It was just beginning. The connection between American Jews and Israel was once unshakable. It was built on survival, pride, and the belief that Israel was the heart of the Jewish people. But as time passed, as new generations emerged, the once clear bond became complicated. For many American Jews today, Israel is still a powerful symbol. But it's also a source of deep debate, even division. From unity to uncertainty. The generation that witnessed 1948 and 1967 saw Israel as a miracle, a homeland that rose from the ashes of the Holocaust, a nation that stood against all odds. To them, supporting Israel was not a question, it was a duty. But younger American Jews grew up in a different world. They didn't witness Israel's birth. They didn't feel the panic of the Six-Day War. They weren't shaped by the fear that Israel might not survive. Instead, they grew up seeing a different Israel, an Israel caught in an endless conflict, an Israel making choices that didn't always seem heroic, an Israel that some believed was no longer just the underdog, but also the powerful. And that changed everything. Among older American Jews, being pro-Israel meant unquestionable support. It meant standing with Israel, defending it, and ensuring that America always had its back. But for many younger Jews, it's not that simple. They ask difficult questions. Can I love Israel but still criticize its actions? Does being Jewish mean I have to agree with Israel's government? What happens if my values and Israel's politics don't align? These questions have divided families, split communities, and even shaped political movements. For some, criticizing Israel feels like betrayal. For others, staying silent feels like hypocrisy. For much of the 20th century, Judaism and Zionism were deeply linked in America. To be Jewish meant to support Israel. But today, that identity is shifting. More and more young Jews are saying, I am Jewish, but I don't know how I feel about Israel. And this has led to something no one expected, an identity crisis. Some Jews feel trapped between loyalty and morality. Others feel torn between their community and their beliefs. And many simply don't know where they fit anymore. For the first time in history, Israel is not just uniting American Jews, it's dividing them. Jewish organizations that were once seen as untouchable now face backlash. Synagogues that used to avoid politics now struggle to keep peace between members. On college campuses, Jewish students fight among themselves. Some passionately defend Israel. Others join protests against it. It's a reality that would have been unthinkable decades ago. Despite all the debates, all the divisions, all the uncertainty, one thing remains true. Israel still matters to American Jews. Whether they defend it or question it, whether they embrace it or struggle with it, it is still part of their story. Because even with all the changes, one thing is certain. The conversation isn't over. For decades, the bond between American Jews and Israel was a source of strength. It was about survival, about history, about the unbreakable thread that connected a people to their homeland. But today, that bond is no longer so simple. It is filled with love and pride, but also with doubt and debate. It carries the weight of history, but also the uncertainty of the future. And that brings us back to the very question we started with. Did Israel shape American Jews, giving them a renewed sense of identity, pride, and political power? Or did American Jews shape Israel, influencing its policies, its image, and even its survival? The answer is both. Israel gave American Jews a cause, a home, a reason to stand together. It transformed how they saw themselves, not just as a scattered people, but as part of something far bigger. At the same time, American Jews helped shape Israel. Their voices, their influence, and their unwavering support made Israel stronger. Their debates, their questions, and even their criticisms forced Israel to evolve. But now, a new chapter is unfolding. With every generation, the relationship between Israel and American Jews shifts. New questions arise. New challenges emerge. The world changes, and so do the people who live in it. So, what happens next? Will this bond grow stronger? Or will the tensions that exist today push them further apart? One thing is certain, this story isn't over. It's still being written. By you, by me, by every Jew who wonders where they stand. And as history unfolds, only time will tell. Let us know in the comments, and if you found this story eye-opening, subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with others. Because history is more than just the past. It's the choices we make today.